Okay, this is tutorial 4, and in this tutorial I'm going to explain to you how to write the methodology of your project. Obviously, to start with, you need to go into the Google Classroom and into the mini projects section, just like you did in the other 3 tutorials, and you need to open up the Coaster Mini project and the instructions. You might also choose at the very start, before even looking at instructions, to read the methodology of this sample project. Now, if we have a look at the instructions, we're going to be writing the methodology, and methodologies can be written in a number of different ways. I'm going to give you a very structured approach, which involves writing 4 kind of sections or subheadings to your methodology. In the first part, we call this the plan. Now, in the plan, you need to outline where you're going to be visiting to gather your data, and why this is an appropriate location to visit in order to gather your data. You need to tell me when you are planning to visit, the date that you visited, and why that was a suitable date. Now, when we're out on the field trip, we'll no doubt discuss why it's a suitable date. For me, June, when we went, is suitable because, first of all, you're most likely to get the best weather, appropriate weather for gathering data. Therefore, you're not going to have strong winds and heavy rain, or you're unlikely to have this, which would potentially get in the way of gathering accurate data. Second of all, in spring and summer, all of the plants will be growing and flowering, which makes identifying the biodiversity much easier, because it's easier to spot a lot of the flowers and other plants in the sand dunes. Whereas if you went in winter, everything might have died back, and it therefore becomes more difficult to identify it. Okay. Finally, you need to outline briefly, and you don't need a long list. You don't need to tell me how. You just have to say what data you're going to have to gather and the equipment you're going to need. So you'd be saying, I'm going to need to gather data on the biodiversity, the number of species at a range of locations moving back from the coast. I'm going to have to gather data on the pH. And I'm also going to want to gather some data on the gradient in order to see if gradient has any effect on biodiversity or pH. The equipment I'm going to need for that would be a soil auger to allow me to gather soil samples. I need a quadrat in order to identify percentage of different plants that exist. And I'm going to need ranging poles, a tape measure, and a clinometer to record my gradient data. Then we come onto the site. So site, you should always be using Ordnance Survey maps for this. You can start off with a general map that's not Ordnance Survey that shows the location of Fife in the context of Scotland, with Tentsmuir with an arrow pointing to Tentsmuir. That's a good logical first map to use. And I would suggest you might want to have a look at the coastal project sample to see how this student showed their location. Once you've kind of shown the location of Tentsmuir in terms of Scotland, you're then going to want to use an Ordnance Survey map. So we've got map 1, a simple map, map 2, a detailed map, which shows the transect. Now in class, I'm going to be showing you how to use Google Draw to add some annotations, but you are going to get your map from Digimap, and Digimap is found on RMUnify, and if you scroll down, you'll see here is the Digimap login, and I will give you the username and the password the first time to get in, or you need to see me if you're not there in the lesson, and that allows you to then log in, and once you're logged into Digimap, you have access to the whole of the United Kingdom Ordnance Survey. And this is just loading up, and I could quickly put in St Andrews over here, and it's going to put St Andrews Fife, and there's a map. Close, and then if I just scroll up, I'll get to Tentsmuir Beach. So there's Tentsmuir. I can make it full screen like there, and I could use that. I could even zoom in if I wanted a more detailed map. Maybe if where's the car park? There's the car park that we park in. So we're likely to have done our study somewhere in here. I can zoom in even further if I want a more detailed map. So there's the actual dunes that we are going to study in here. Okay, so you can decide on the zoom level that you want, what's the most appropriate map, and then I'll show you in class how to annotate it. Okay, so that's number 2, identifying the site. You do need a written description as well as these visual descriptions that actually locate your study area. Okay, so that's what this outlines. And I would pay attention to this. You might want to use the higher geography textbook that you'll be given that helps locate the particular study. And if you do use the textbook, remember, if you quote something from the textbook, remember to cite it, as I've said here. Okay. Third of all, sampling, really important. This is actually where most of the marks come from. So what do I want to know? I want to know about the transect that you used. Why did we do a straight line transect? I will want to know about the systematic sampling technique that we used, where each site was located 10 meters from the other site. Why was that technique used? Why was it appropriate for this particular study? And that's this bit here, why you justify it. I also want to know, why did we do the number of samples we did? Okay, so why did we do over 40 samples? Why was that important? What data did that give us? You might want to outline any weaknesses with this study. So for example, we only did one transect, so we only really have looked at one particular part of the beach. And obviously, if we're doing 10 meters apart, we may be missing really important bits of data in between those 10 meter sample sites. Because remember, systematic sampling, where you do it at equal intervals, is not flexible, so you can't change where you're going to put your site. If something gets in the way and prevents you from going to that site, then you have a problem. Right, lastly, the data gathering. Now, this is what you would have done very good at higher geography, where when you were writing up your methodology, you explained in an awful lot of detail in your anti-burn investigation how you went about gathering data. In advanced higher, it's less important. My suggestion is, if you have a photograph, and I on the day will advise you to take some photographs of people gathering data, that you annotate one of those photos, not label, but you annotate it with lots of labels that explain what is going on in the photo and the data that's being gathered and the techniques that are being used. What this then allows you to do is write just a quick summary of that process, and specifically the equipment's used and how the equipment was used and why it was done in the way it was done. So, for example, the quadrat, how many times did you use the quadrat? How did you lay the quadrat out? Why did you do it 4 times around the north, south, east, west, around the ranging pole? Once again, that's more to do with sampling. Why did you use the clinometer, and how did you use the clinometer the way that you used it? How did you get the pH? What equipment did you use? Were there any limitations of using that particular equipment? You might want to kind of briefly mention that. Okay, so there is the methodology explained with the 4 sections. You will need a little bit of guidance in terms of getting your maps, but I do suggest have a little look at the mini project, at the Google Coast project sample, to guide you on how to do this. So that's the end of tutorial 4.